Eytan, welcome to the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast.
Hey Simon, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Ah, my pleasure indeed. I'm very well. I'm very glad to have you on the show and willing to sort of have a chat to us and share a bit of your story. It's really great to meet you. So, Eytan, I know we're going to get to having a bit of a chat about the business quantum networks that you're a part of. You've certainly been involved in numerous entities, so hopefully we can pack as much of that into this period as we can. But maybe you could kick off for us a little bit and just give the listeners a bit of your background and kind of what got you into business in the first place.
Sure. So I have an interesting background as far as business is concerned in that I have no business background. So I actually went to school, I was like pre-med, and then I actually went to dental school for a year, and I really didn't like it, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I found some job posting about some digital marketing, and kind of that's like the beginning of the story of my business background, and I kind of just started from there. I can go into detail of the journey, but there's no background. It's
Yeah,
all learning on the streets or as you go,
yeah,
etc. Yeah.
cool. Hey, out of interest, a lot of my guests that have come on have talked about family and things like that might have led. I mean, does your family run their own businesses? Did they come from that kind of background?
So on the contrary, no. My families are all doctors and dentists, and all my friends are doctors, and they're great, and I like science. But no, I mean, my grandfather was in business, actually both of them, but mostly not don't have any family experience. So that's also why it's
Yeah.
a bit odd. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so it's one of my dear friends was telling me if you're looking around the room of your family, and you can't work out who the weird one is, it's probably you. And
Yeah.
so that was his advice to me. So it sounds like
Yeah.
maybe we're kindred spirits here. We're maybe the different ones in our family because I
Yeah.
certainly didn't come from an entrepreneurial background either.
Exactly. Exactly. It's still a little interesting to me. I think about what it would be like if I didn't have certain things happen. It's, like every time I go to the dentist, I'm like, what if this was me every day? It's hard to fathom, but thank God I'm not there, and I'm pretty happy for the most
Yeah,
part.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Good
Yeah.
stuff. So tell us a little bit of quantum networks. What was that business?
Okay. Um, yeah, so I guess more high level, Quantum Networks was an Amazon reseller. As you probably notice these days, that's a very hot thing. There's a lot of these aggregators buying up Amazon brands, which you probably see in your business. Um, but when I started, it wasn't hot. It was kind of strange and very difficult, and we failed a lot, myself and my partner and some other people that worked with me, in order to like pivot to a model that was actually a sellable business, which was very hard to do. Now, ironically, Amazon businesses are being sold all the time, but 18 months ago or 2 years ago when I sold that, like was not a thing. So my timing maybe wasn't great in that regard, especially a reseller. So basically, we resold electronics and tech products. So we had a few different models, but basically we had exclusive brands that we would represent and do all the advertising and logistics and support, and we'd make a margin on the sale. And then we had like our own branded accessories. Um, we pivoted to this bundle model that my partner kind of came up with because we wanted to be relevant. So, similar to some of your other guests, I'm sure you tell your clients, okay, what's the point? Like, is your business worth anything? What's the big deal? So,
Yep.
4 or 5 years ago, we're like, okay, what's the point? Yeah, we do a lot of revenue. Maybe we make enough to pay the bills. So we started to create a brand. We created this bundle model that my partner John like kind of pioneered, and we
Yep.
went from just reselling to adding value. So, for example, I like to give this example, especially on a podcast. These mics, which some people have those big ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those are the kind of products, especially that are very useful now with this whole new world. And those are the kind of products that are a bit prosumer that you need a little help and support, right? You could buy it on Amazon, but really even the cross-related, you know, options on Amazon are a bit AI and weak.
Yep.
So that's the kind of thing. If you remember going to a store, uh, if some people remember what that was like, you actually have a salesman help you. So we
Yeah.
found all these products that are a bit prosumer that we already focused in, and we created these value-added bundles around it. So if you have a podcasting mic, we would sell the mic plus the filter plus the cable as a solution. So it
Yes.
was very above board as well. So we told the brand about it, let's say it was Jabra or Sennheiser or one of these bigger brands, they're very, concerned about their brand and their image. So it wasn't done in a, it was done in a professional way where they approved of it, they liked it, the customer got a good experience, we got a more strategic sale. So we had our own dedicated listings. It was called Blue Coil, that was the brand, and we created thousands of them over time, where we stood out as like a bundle solution. Now that's been done before on Amazon and people still do it, but it was kind of a niche model, which allowed us to go from just being a reseller with lower margins to a more strategic branded partner. So we wound up with like a lot of sales in this bundle model, maybe like 60+% of our revenue,
Yep.
all different bundle solutions for streaming and storage and you name it. And then we had like still 30 or 40 brands that we were like the exclusive reseller of that really needed the cash up front, and it was a margin business. And then we still had some just typical resale stuff that wasn't so added value, but that combined mix was what I guess was attractive to this acquirer that was really a retail consumer product good company, and they wanted more of an online presence. And they had
Yeah.
some digital acquisitions, and we were like one of their, I don't know, fourth or fifth in that arena. So that's like a
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
I guess, short summary of what we were and who we
Yeah.
became.
Yeah, wow, wow, and a lot to kind of unpack here. So you started the business, I think, in 2008. Is that right?
Yeah, it was very different then, but officially, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you mentioned you're sort of going into electronic products and stuff like that. What drove that? I mean, did you have a kind of a passion for that, a background, or what led to
Yeah,
that sort of
so
decision?
yeah, so when I started, first I got into online marketing, and then I was consulting for this guy who had a telecom background, and he was doing telecom infrastructure build out. We actually did some stuff in Australia, so worked with all
Cool.
these different carriers, but it was like a business to business online sale. So we were listing all these wireless products and services online, and we would get leads and try to figure out how to close them and hook people up with the right integrator or the right installation partner, etc. So it was like this SEO based lead gen based on what I knew in online marketing. And then that was cool. We made some money on these deals, these big government and large network deals, but it was very slow sales cycle, right? So it could take 3, 4 years to close. And it wasn't really paying the bills. So we kind of accidentally, or I don't know, maybe purposely pivoted to something that was more consistent. So we actually listed some of these products on eBay, and they were more niche. So there wasn't really competition. And then we use a lot of our best practice to market them. So first we started on eBay, then we started with a Magento website, and we just used best practice that I had learned and my partner had learned of, um, SEO and pay-per-click and Google Shopping before it was really competitive. It was very easy then, and these were
Yep.
brands that had no presence. So we quickly became like the fastest growing resellers of these brands. Um, that led eventually to going into Amazon, which is a whole new audience. So once we brought these exclusive brands that we kind of had exclusivity on to Amazon, the sales just like went crazy because we had good pricing, we had the infrastructure down to grow, and then also we had the audience.
Yeah.
Once we hit Amazon, it kind of got a bit fragmented because there was so much growth, but actually we came back to our roots where we focused more on this niche model, right? So then it was like niche products, and eventually it was that plus a solution of bundling. But it was always based on like how do we add more value to the client, not just reselling and not just me too. So
Yeah.
we got a little lost on the way, and
Yeah.
maybe neglected to look at margins or whatever. But hopefully, or I guess we figured it out to some extent.
I think that's kind of one of those traps of fast growth, right? Like you everything's moving so fast. It's hard to sometimes come and pick up all the pieces of, well, are we crossing the T's and dotting the I's on margin and all these other things in our business?
Right.
So that makes sense. What does high growth mean? I mean, obviously, look, only things that you can share with me. But can you give us an indication of like revenue and things like that?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, once we started selling, we did a few 100,000, and then I think the following year we did like 3 million. And then once we hit Amazon, we were at around 3 million. And then once we were like more, I don't know, a year or 18 months into Amazon, we were already at like almost 30 million.
Yeah,
Now,
well,
again, that wasn't all, let's say, profitable sales, which I learned, let's say, later on or the hard way. But because of all that pain and growth and pivoting, we learned kind of how to do it right? How to ship and how to do taxes and how to do international and how to do whatever model it may be and what works and what doesn't. Kind of before a lot of these other brands that are doing it now have done it. So I've done it like in a different environment. I mean, now it's very different because Amazon's that much bigger. So there's
yep.
still a lot of opportunity. But like the models are the same.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Um, take me back to the beginning again for a moment. So you mentioned I think you had a business partner?
I had a partner that I joined. He had this telecom business, and I was with an agency helping him with digital, and then I kind of partnered with him on initiative. And then I had another partner until I sold, John, who was actually in high school. He was only 15. I was 24, and my other partner was a bit older, and that was the beginning. We kind of sat in a small cube in Manhattan. We like sublet from someone who was subleasing. We had no real money or anything, and we just kind of started from there.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I've got to ask, right? I mean, you know, our core firm is Exit Advisory Group, and we talk a lot about
Yeah.
exiting and planning and all this sort of stuff. Was there ever a discussion between you guys around, so what are we building here? Where are we going? What's the end game look like? Or was it just, you know, we're all young and hungry and excited about an opportunity?
Yeah, I don't know if I was ever asked that, but I think about it. Um, because now I think for this business I'm running now, which we'll talk about, like what's the point? What's the goal? Like
Yep.
monetarily wise and quality of life wise. But then, yeah, no, I was just like sucking it in and learning and growing and failing. I never really thought about where it would go. I guess maybe I was naive and thought, oh, it could just get bigger. Again, I
Yep.
wasn't looking at margin. I had no idea what I was doing. But sometimes that's good, right? To a
Yep.
point. So it definitely made a lot of mistakes. But no, we never really talked about, oh, we're going to be the biggest this or that. There was no set goal. There was no business plan. There was it was very on the fly. Over time, we developed more mature strategies and plans and forecasting and again learning finance stuff the hard way, which I'm
Yep.
still learning. But no, there was no objective,
Yeah,
however
yeah.
that may sound. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've
no
heard that
end
a
game,
lot, but
right?
there was none.
Well, I think too at that age, I mean, you've got so much runway. It's like you can't even see the end of the runway, right? It's like, we're just heading in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I was already married. I had like a kid on the way, and I was like out of school, and I was like very anxious about that. So I needed to try to succeed. But yeah, I
Yeah,
had some time to play around a little. My wife was working, and like I had a little time to figure it out, and I guess I eventually did, but it was not easy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So okay. So one of the other the big questions, yeah. Did you guys have any kind of shareholders agreement? Did you implement one at some point or anything like that?
Yeah, good question. Also, one of these like stupid, why did you do that? We had some primitive agreements, but as you probably hear from founders, it usually comes back to haunt you if not done right. Whatever lawyers do costs. We figured it out because obviously there's some challenges along the way with whatever investor or person, but I guess it wasn't that bad. Definitely
Mm,
caused some pain that could have been avoided, which I learned in the future to be careful.
yep.
But I guess it was like quasi formal, so it could have been worse, but definitely led to some issues, which is, I'm sure you hear that a lot. So for anyone
Yeah.
listening, make sure you have all your papers in a row, even if you're not sure it's going to work out or it's just not worth the legal cost if something happens, God forbid, to neglect that.
Yeah, yeah. Have the awkward discussion while we're all still friends, right? And hopefully you're still friends at
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
end. But
Yeah. Listen, at the same time, like I remember my older partner saying like, it's just a piece of paper, which is true, and lawyers are lawyers, but still, like you need a framework, and it's not just legal is more extreme, but even just to understand, like to your point, what's the point? Like what are the shareholders' values and mission statement? All those things should be done, even if it's
Mm,
cheesy or premature. Like it's really important.
yeah, yeah. It's a starting point. Yeah, I guess it's as you say, it's a framework, right? It helps guide thinking and discussions. It's not necessarily where you're going to end up in the end, but it's yeah. Hopefully, and had plenty of guests whose partnerships have all just gone swimmingly and they've had a great time and they've all started happy and ended happy and challenges along the way, but they did it together and it's all this lovely, bromance story. But it's but yeah, look, so many of these things can go sideways. So it's yeah, it is an
Yep.
interesting factor. So you started in 2008 and I think you said you sold in 2020, was it?
Yeah. The first day of 2020.
Yeah, right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So was that 12 odd years,
Yeah.
11 and a half, something like that. Can I ask, was there a point in the journey that you started to think, hey, maybe we should sell this company? Like obviously there's,
Yeah.
you obviously did sell, so clearly you had some thoughts at some point, but was there
So Yeah. So again, people who are listening to you and like it's way out of the game. Like I wasn't thinking like that at all. Like, oh, I could sell, or there's a thing like selling, or even what that. I mean, now I know a lot about it, almost too much in some ways, which is fascinating in its own right. When I'm sure you have fun with it, like it's very cool, and all the different ways to buy and sell, and who you could sell it to. It's cool. It's amazing, and there's also challenges in it. But no, I didn't really think about that. I think what happened was I was getting a bit burnt out over the last few years of just doing it for so long,
Mm,
and I was always very entrepreneurial and trying to do a bunch of things at once, which usually didn't work. So I actually still started a few other things which we could touch on, which were hopefully or supposed to be interrelated and not too much of a distraction. And many of them
mm,
were. Some were distractions, and many failed. But somehow I made it together in one piece and learned that lesson. And I wasn't really thinking about selling. I think I got burnt out. I think I just wanted to try other things. I personally wasn't able to add as much value because the business was actually running pretty efficiently to a
mhm,
certain extent. Obviously, I had certain contributions, but eventually my partner was doing a really great job. I had a really good team. Again, it was very hard to get it. So
mm.
what's the next step?
Yep.
Obviously he also had his own decisions to make, and maybe he wanted to look into new things, or figured it was a good time. So then at the end, we're like, okay, like maybe we could sell it. We're not going to
Mm,
liquidate it. We're not going to give it to our kids. So then it started with like maybe, and then like we just made it happen, which was a lot of pain, but that's kind of how it arose. I think it was burnout slash like next step. It wasn't like, oh, we can make so much money, like this is amazing. It was like
yeah.
we probably need to do this, and therefore we'll make it happen.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
it
what
kind of
happened.
it kind of evolved into a
Yeah,
sale. Yeah, yeah.
correct. Yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think too, one of the things I've seen a lot is where you do have business partners of different age groups too. Like sometimes people are at a different stage of life, so they're you start sort of maybe going in different directions of what you want. So that can be the catalyst for the discussion, I guess. But
yeah.
what was the size of the team by the time you exited?
Oh, it's about 22 people
Yeah, that's
in
quite
New
lean,
York.
isn't it? Yeah.
22 in New York, and we had a bunch of overseas people in Philippines and elsewhere,
Hmm.
Eastern Europe. I don't know, maybe 25 and six, including all remote. So
Yep.
it's pretty lean considering the revenue.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, that's the approximate amount.
Yeah, yeah, and by the time you were sort of getting ready, that last year or so. I mean, put aside the transaction and the effort that goes into that, but kind of how many hours a week would you say roughly that you were typically doing in the business at that point?
You're saying before the sale process?
Yeah, before the sale process, because that's a unique beast, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that was also part of the issue. Like there's only so much I could contribute after a certain point. My partner was really doing a lot and was good at things that I was not, etc.
Hmm.
So he probably put in, I can't really speak for him, but if I had to say, I don't know, a lot of time, maybe 10 to 15 hours a day. Like he works very
Oh
hard.
wow, yeah,
But not every day. Again, we had more help at certain times than others. So it depends on the people and the issue. Sometimes it would be a little easier, sometimes a little harder. He's a hard worker. I used
mm,
to do those kind of hours, and I kind of still did, but I wasn't as focused on tasks and goals. And then I really took to the sale process because that was like my mission. So like I
yeah,
like a challenge. I need to be challenged, and I guess every day I wasn't as challenged because there's only so much we could diversify, etc. In
yep,
the current environment, I didn't want to mess with a good thing, so I just really put all my energy into the sale process, which was successful. Obviously,
yeah,
not easy, but I really took that as like my thing. Like, let's do all the diligence, let's get all the work in, let's like speak to the lawyers, and like I actually enjoyed the hunt a bit,
yep.
but it was very grueling to your point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I've had guests and plenty of guests, and look, obviously done a few things myself. But it's I've had a lot of guests describe it as a second job almost. I mean, does that?
So it's maybe second and third job. So if I didn't
Yeah,
have my, I didn't if I didn't have my partner John like running the business, as you often hear, like right, everyone wants to sell a business, but if you fall apart at the end, or even if you decline revenue, it's a big deal. You can't
yeah,
go out on a lull, or if you do, it's really bad. So he was able to run it, and I was able to focus on the sell. Obviously, he helped me with that too, but that was cool. We were able to tag
yeah,
team on that.
yep,
And I recommend obviously I'm sure people, your audience has heard this, but yeah, you can't just stop what you're doing and work on the sale because then your business falls apart.
Yeah.
It's a really tight dance, and like I've seen
Yeah.
it go really bad for many people, and it's a shame because then you have nothing. You have no, a weak business and no sale, which happens all the time. No one talks about
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
as you know, there's a lot of people that never sell or they try and it doesn't work out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I've seen it end in tears a few times. And from the time you sort of decided, okay, we're going to do this, right? We're going to sell this business. How long did it take from that kind of moment to getting a close?
Yeah, I think we were thinking about it at the end of 2018, and then we kind of started talking to some banker, broker types in the beginning of 2019,
Hmm.
and then we finalized on a banker in April,
Hmm.
and then we got a letter of intent in the end of August, and then we sold at the end of December. So that's like a year all in, easier said
Yeah.
than done, but that was the sequence of events.
Yeah, yeah, and that sounds very typical of a lot of the sort of transactions we see. It's kind of out to 12 months and can be shorter, can be longer, but yeah, it's seems to be the average approach. So is that how you guys went about it? Then you mentioned a sort of banker broker kind of people. Is that how you started, by speaking to those people and saying, well, tell us about yourself and what you do and how you do it and
Yeah.
all the rest?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so now I actually know a lot more about it, especially because like I'm still in this Amazon space and there's so many sales and whatnot, but and I have some really good bankers I know, and it's again it's very fascinating to me. But I didn't know anything then, so I like to learn. So I actually just started speaking to some of my friends who were in the banking field or M&A, just how does this work? And again, a lot of them are like, oh, well, maybe, you're an Amazon business. Like, how does that work? Which is a whole other topic as discussed
Yeah.
before. But I started just asking kind of what the deal is, and I spoke to some investment banks that were not in the right. Sorry, I spoke to some brokers that were very, I guess, downstream, so to speak, meaning they'll get
Yes.
you a multiple of two or three or maybe four and like a crazy effort.
Yeah.
But they also had like this reverse model, right, where they take a lot up front. It's more like just like list you on a website and it's like
Yeah.
eBay,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is super cool that that exists. But I wanted to be more strategic. And, in our case, like I say, we sold to this public company, which is great. But it's not just that they're public. Obviously, they actually weren't public when we sold. They became public after that. But the point is, hopefully, as you know, they'll pay more money because it's more
Mm.
strategic. And 1 + 1 = 10. How do you
Yeah.
find that? So I knew we
Yeah.
had certain qualities, or we know we had certain qualities that would garner that. And a broker's kind of just looking maybe for the quickest, fastest deal. To
Yeah.
get 5, 6, 7, 8x, you need strategy, context, network, and to run a process. And that's what we
Yeah.
wind
Yeah.
up doing.
That's a really interesting point, and we've seen the same thing. I obviously in the Australian market, I work with a lot of people in the US and Canada as well, and this common thread seems to be that when you've got brokers out there who only work on a success fee only model, well, hey, if all I've got is a hammer, I treat everything like a nail. I get paid when you take the deal, so guess what? This is the deal I've got. You should take it. And that seems to be and I don't want to sort of tar everybody with the same
Yeah,
brush,
yeah.
but that's been a common approach, I think, for that kind of the brokery kind of end of the market, as opposed to
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, how do you come up with a strategic campaign? How do you align interests as advisors with the business owners so you're both pushing in the
Yeah.
same direction?
Yeah, so hindsight's 2020, but even in a banking scenario, I think these bankers did a good job. Um, if you really go deep, there's more, right? Let's say you
Yep.
have an earnout. So do they benefit from that? And you may be like, they shouldn't benefit from an earnout because it's not their work. But what if you have issues and you need their help? What if
Mm.
they ride along with you, which I've heard before, and that can work. And if their goal or a banker's goal or a broker's goal is to get you 5 or 10 or whatever million, then once they get a dollar over from a broker from an offer, if their compensation structure is not such that it matters, they're not going to try
Mm.
more, right? So you have to think about that because it's really complicated. The you should everyone I think should have a banker advisor. I'm sure you would agree. I think if you don't, or if you don't think the person could get you 3 or 4% more, then like they must be really bad.
Mm.
Obviously, there's shades of gray there, but even though you have a broker, you have to really be careful about the agreement with them and get an attorney to review that because if you like, I just gave you a couple of examples about should they be involved in an earnout or an equity swap,
Mm,
or how do you incentivize them? Because if they're not incentivized to milestones, they're just going to take the first deal and just move on. I'm not
mm,
saying that happened to me. I'm saying I've seen
yeah,
that in the space and I see how that plays, and I never would have known that. That's
yeah,
kind of a deep multivariable topic, but yeah, that's kind of how I, you know, learned the lesson.
yeah. Yeah, and isn't it? It's it's a little bit like building a house in a lot of ways. I've met numerous people who decided to build their own house. You know, I'm an owner builder, and they do all this work, and they go through all this pain and suffering and learnings, and then they never build another house. So it's like, actually, well, the first one's where you made all the lessons, got all the hard lessons, and it cost you all this extra money, so you could be better at it. And, you
Yeah.
know, so I have no doubt you approach deals these days probably differently to how you would have done it the first time around.
Yeah, I believe there's a reason for everything. So I believe, whether I got screwed in some ways or benefit in some ways, I could use that for my next company, and that's
Yeah,
that's probably the way to think about it. But not everyone wants to do that or has the energy, and I get that. That's why you have to be really careful. If this
yeah,
is your whole lifelong business and you're, like you have to have like this margin of error, and it's very complicated. It sounds all
yeah,
like
yeah.
glorious, but it's very, very tedious and scary at the same time.
Yeah, it's a funny one, and for those listening who are thinking of selling or going through this sort of transaction process, as Eitan's explained, I mean, it could be 12 months that you're working with these advisors, and you do kind of, in a lot of ways, spend a lot of time. You kind of get to know each other, and you want to kind of make sure that you're going on that journey with the right people. And I think a lot of that does come down to your gut too. Like, you can do all this homework, but I think if your gut tells you this particular advisor is not quite right, and to use a fairly sort of vulgar sort of term, I guess, as one of my colleagues says, if it stinks at the beginning, it's going to absolutely reek at the end, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not the right people to jump in that canoe with, right? So,
Yeah, and I think in our scenario, yeah, 100%, I agree 100%. And in our case, I did like really want to go with certain parties because they did similar deals, and I thought that was like the most important thing. But I saw they were a little off, and I was like, okay, like,
yeah,
and I overlooked it. But then I realized like, no, this is a problem. So thank God for that. But
mm,
yeah, there's always someone could always have done something better. It's never going to be perfect. But if you don't really
yeah,
do the diligence on the banker and the deal and the agreement, you're shortchanging so much of the value that you built over the life of the business. Like, as you know, you make most of the money on the sale. So if you don't do it right, or you do it that much off, it's really significant. So
yeah.
it's important to be prepared and educated.
Yeah, yeah, great advice. So back to quantum for a moment. So you started on this process. You said it was a public company, so you can actually say who the buyer was, right? It's
Yeah, no, I could say it wasn't public when I sold it.
yeah,
It became public at the end of 2020. It's called Advantage Solutions. So they're like a
okay,
public CPG consumer product good company. They do a lot of retail sales brokering into like Walmart and Target in the US. They actually own a company called, or they have like some subsidiary called Smullen in South Africa that also has
hmm,
some presence in Australia. So they're pretty global. It's like a
yeah,
$4
cool.
billion company.
Nice, nice. So clearly there was synergies in what they're doing. There was a few strategic levers as to why they were looking at you.
Yeah, so as I alluded a bit, they had a very big brick and mortar presence, and obviously that's been really disrupted since COVID, but even before, right? They saw
Mm,
the writing on the wall and they additionally wanted a digital presence. So they already bought a few Amazon or e-commerce, Shopify, whatever related businesses or agencies. So we were just
yep.
I guess another notch in that. Obviously we had our own, you know, methods and strategies as discussed and logistics and go to market model, but that was like the interest or the synergy. What if they brought their brands to us to do the Amazon or ecom work, right? Because they have
Yeah,
so many
gotcha.
brands, and like that would be a great, you know, potential. That was kind of the thought process.
Yeah, great. And were there other parties in the mix? Like, did you get any other offers from other people?
Yeah, we did. I think this was the most attractive as far as, let's say, the value or the synergy or a lot of things. Because
Yep.
also you know, it's not just the money, it's not just, the the other party, obviously your employees. Like, I want to make sure all my employees moved over, which they did, which is cool. And who are you working with? And it's very hard to kind of understand that when
Yeah.
you're just like sending emails, or maybe you meet someone once. How do you know what it's going to be like to work with them if you have an earnout or if you don't? That's very hard to figure out. I don't
Yep.
know how I, would have done that differently. So that's always interesting to see how different companies are run.
Yep.
Um, just kind of, I'm not sure how you handle that with your clients, but it's one of those things that I don't really get. Like, you're going to work with this
Mm.
company for so long, or maybe for a year or two, but do you even know who you're working with? So
Yeah.
that's like something that I had to get around my head around, and I had to kind of weigh that into or we had to weigh that into the decision, yes, between these guys and whoever else was interested. So back to your question, sorry, we had some other offers of different levels of seriousness and
Mm.
uh, strength, but this was, I guess, more felt a bit better on many levels. So we kind
Yeah.
of pursued that, and once you pursue that, like, you're exclusive with that deal, so you can't really do the others.
Yes.
So that's also a hard decision. Like, okay, we're doing this,
Yeah.
because maybe the other ones will go away. But we
Yep.
had some offers. I would have liked more. Obviously, I would have liked to have a more competitive process. But you can't always have that. But it was pretty thorough, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure the bankers created a sense of competitive tension for the
They try.
buyers.
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting. It's kind of like a game in a way, with
Yeah.
all with data transfer and whatnot, which is also interesting to me. But yeah, it was an interesting process.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of the benefit of having an intermediary, right? Is that they can help manage that process in a way that it sort of protects you from the fray and
Yeah,
creates that sense of competitive tension.
for
Yeah,
sure.
I with a lot of my guests, Eitan, we talk a lot about the sort of deal structures, and I don't want to go into anything that might be confidential for you, but we do see obviously most deals kind of have one or more portion of either there's cash up front. Maybe there's a deferred component where like it's not at risk, but you get paid in over time, and then there's kind of an earnout that can often be at risk, or fully at risk, or partially at risk. Are you able to give us a sense of, did you have one, or was it split over different sort of things like that for you?
Yeah, I can't really say much, but I'll say, just because of the confidentiality in the agreement. But I would say
Of
that, yeah, it
course.
was like, kind of portion up front, portion over time kind of deal.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
incentive
Gotcha.
based and goal based,
Yep.
which is kind of, maybe the best of both worlds. We're trying to achieve some liquidity plus, upside earnout kind of
Yep.
model,
Yeah.
something like
Gotcha.
that.
Yeah, yeah, gotcha. No, that's fine. And you and your business partners, I presume, were hanging around after the deal for a while.
Yeah. I stayed for like a year.
Okay,
My partner stayed for like another quarter, maybe like 15, 16 months.
gotcha.
I indicated to them that it's always tricky. Like, when someone buys you, they're like, okay, why do you want to sell? Like, why are you getting
Yeah,
out? Maybe the house is on fire.
yeah,
So I just like I told you, I said, this is great. There's a lot of potential, but like, I think we took it as far as maybe we can, and we want to move
yeah,
on, and we could help, and we could cross pollinate and do all these great things, but obviously I don't plan on being here. So obviously I let them know that.
yeah,
It's a bit of a tricky conversation, but I think it went well as far as the communication. They knew I was
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
go, and they had to like kind of get certain things in a row because I was, doing a lot, and that's to transfer
Yeah.
over.
No, and that makes sense. And I think, especially with large companies who do lots of transactions, you would think are pretty good at doing transitions, and they understand that not every vendor is looking to stick around for another 10 or 20 years. So it's, there's wanting to go and do other things is a very legitimate reason for wanting to sell. And so
Yeah,
I think, as you've done, Eitan, I think it's just about having those discussions and being upfront, and yeah, you work your way through it, right?
sure.
Yeah. So you sold the business. I'm always curious. Did you did you have a party? Was there some sort of celebration? Was there a reward, a trophy?
I wish. Uh, no, I actually went. I sold the business. It was New Year's, and we had to do an inventory count on the next day. So like on New Year's, I'm like flying to LA, so that on January 2nd, which is the first day the warehouse is open, I could do a clean inventory count so we can establish, opening balances and all this stuff that I learned too much about.
Yeah.
And I was in the warehouse for like 2 days because they had to audit it, and no, so therefore there's no celebration. I had to like do all the legal work like on the laptop, like on a plane. and then I had to go right into it. And then I had to onboard all hundreds of vendors and like transition. So like the first quarter was really, 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 really hard for me.
Yeah.
Because it was a lot of work, but also it's dealing with a much bigger company with different systems and processes, and I never really had to answer to anybody before.
Yeah,
Right? I
sure.
was like the dude or my partner. Like now it's like huge departments and compliance, and like I learned a lot
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
larger companies, and so the answer is no party, a lot of hard work. I didn't really sleep for like 6 months,
Yep.
and then I kind of slowly tried to transition away. So it was a
Yeah.
very hard year because it's just a lot of work. I still
Mm.
haven't made a formal party. Maybe I will, but no. And I didn't on the emotional side, if you want to go there. I didn't feel like, oh, like, I did it, or
Yeah.
like life is complete, or like, oh, I made it. Again, like I'm very thankful, I made some money, like that's great, but again, it's not just about that. It's also like giving away your baby, so you have that like maybe it's the buyer's remorse or like the emotional side to it. So it's really not, well, let's have a party like you see in
Yeah.
the movies. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe some people are like that, but there's so much emotion, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to internalize it because I had so much to do
Yeah.
that I was like far from relieved, to be honest with you.
And that's once again, I think is quite a common thing because it's not like you sign a contract and it's done. Oh yay! I've suddenly got all this money in my account. I never have to do anything more. Like there's this transition and there's this process. And as you said, you're on flights. There's a lot of work. So you don't. I don't think there's no finish line as such because like it kind of fades out over time until eventually you're
Yeah.
just not doing anything anymore. And so I actually think that's. Yeah, I think there'd be a lot of business owners, certainly a lot of my guests, who would agree with what you've just said. And I think probably too, maybe that's part of the reason why it's so important to have something else to move on to and give you focus and get your joy out of.
Yeah, that's 100% I agree with you. And just to touch on that, so now I'm with this other company, which I'll touch on a bit, but I'm very lucky to have a position now, and I could tell you how it happened if you want to go there. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people, and I could just imagine, like, if I didn't have anything to do, so even though I had a very hard transition, it was just a lot of work and time and effort and big company, like that's life sometimes. I was occupied, right? If I would have
Mm,
just went from that to like zero, I mean, the way I am, I can't like sit still that much. Obviously, I want to
yeah.
balance my work and life, but I can't just like not do anything,
Yep.
money or quality of life aside. So thankfully, I got into this company that I'm working with now
Hmm.
over time, and I was kind of helping them a bit and friendly with them to the point where once the transition completed, I was able to kind of start, and that was very. I mean, I spent a lot of time on it, but I was very lucky to have that.
Yeah.
I don't like if I was still searching for something to do now. I mean, I'm sure I would have found something, but uh, it would just also be very hard to, I guess, be happy
Yeah.
right away.
Yeah. Yeah, completely understand. I think we're fundamentally purpose driven beings, right? It's you need to have something to put your energy and focus on,
Yeah,
and that makes sense. And I want to get to what you're doing a little bit in a moment
sure.
because it's it's the next phase of life, right? But I would be remiss if I didn't ask without going into confidentiality again. But I think a lot of people listening to this would be wondering how Amazon e-com businesses like this typically get valued.
Yeah,
Without going into your numbers or anything that might be private, but are they? We see businesses selling on multiples of revenue or multiples of EBITDA or discounted cash flow models and all this sort of stuff. But was there a typical model that you guys looked at or that buyers
yeah.
traditionally used with you?
So as I mentioned before, it was very rare to sell an Amazon business or brand, let
Mm,
alone a reseller where you don't really have that many agreements and, maybe we had some loan agreements, but not that many. Again, like, what's the moat to compete with it?
yep.
So maybe brands would sell, and even that, like transferring an Amazon account to another entity was also not so clear if you could do it, and Amazon was vague about it. So agencies were starting to sell, like brand, and we kind of did that a bit where we tried. Some of our revenue was from that, where we actually, I'd say I manage your brand and I take a percentage of revenue. So when we went to market, which I didn't mention, most of these private equity and um, capital groups wanted agencies because agencies don't have any inventory.
Yep.
It's a revenue share. It's almost like software.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do. We tried. Now there's many agencies and it became very popular, But the second we mentioned inventory, like many just like hung up the phone.
Yes.
So and for many reasons that I get, because it's hard, especially now with supply chain, it's crazy. But what's crazy is, as I mentioned to some of the listeners who know, this whole sort of SEO aggregator model where they're buying Amazon brands left and right, they literally want you to be Amazon. They want you to be concentrated, which is always bad. They want you to have inventory, which is always bad. So this is a little after I
Yeah.
sold, the world changed. So
Yeah.
with that frame of mind and that understanding, now there's like a multiple of EBITDA for these Amazon brands.
Gotcha.
It could be 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on the size.
Yes. Yes.
It was probably 2 to 3. Now it's 3 to 5, based on the fact that the market's so competitive, and it's almost like a bubble with all these aggregators. So we
Yeah.
didn't really have our own brand. We had an agency, but it was a reseller. So whatever. Those are the variables.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't know 4 or 5, 6, 7. It really depended on the buyer, the timing, lots of other things.
Yeah.
So I came in with a big range, and it was somewhat accurate. But right now it's very different than what it was. Like right now I could tell you
Yeah.
with pretty much certainty what a brand sells for based on what size and agency, because there's so many more
Yeah.
transactions. It was
Yep.
kind of it was very new, if not, unheard of at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Look, and I think that the takeaway here for listeners is, don't just accept a basic range, right? There are so many variables that you've just heard from Eitan's example as well. Like, how big is your revenue? How much margin do you actually get versus other people? What is the actual timing? All these different arrangements that can make you different from the guy standing next to you. So
Yeah.
I think that's the point. And as you
100%.
even pointed out, to even timing, right? Timing in the market, and it's funny because this last 12 months. I mean, I hear people, and it's even been reported in the press these days, best time in M&A history ever. More money, more deals being done right now than ever before. Whereas I think people would have, if you go back a year, people would never have thought that would be happening through the tail end of a pandemic, right? So, being in the market at the right time and dealing with the right people in the right timing can be a massive variable as well.
For sure. And you can never really know the answer to that.
Yeah.
You try your best and listen to some of the other things we said today, but the timing one is tough, right? If everyone knew that,
Yeah.
they'd be very wealthy in the market, but it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so before I move on from quantum, my last question for you is if somebody was going out into Amazon land and getting into e-com and stuff like this, is there a couple of tips that you'd share with them about how to start a business like this, or a couple of the key things they should focus on?
Yeah, now it's kind of, again, more common. When I started, it was not such a common thing to do. But, if you look at some of these courses that exist now, there's like real business plans and ways to grow an Amazon business. So even though it's competitive, Amazon and e-commerce customer base is just growing so much that there's room for people to get in. I recommend like trying to find something a bit niche, kind of like I did, meaning there's a lot of conquered categories like power banks and whatnot. You're probably not going to be successful, but if you come up, always used to say this, I still do, if you come up with a model or a product that's just hasn't been turned into e-commerce yet, like I used to say, plumbing supplies, like it's very convoluted and complicated, but what if you just had a website where you had every product, every solution? It's very hard to build, it's very hard to assure the right fit, whatever it may be, but if you could figure that out, you'll be one of the only ones doing it. It's very, very difficult. So I like to find, or I encourage, it's not easy it's easier said than done, but I encourage people to find things that are a bit out there, because they're probably going to sell online. I think everything will be online, like everything and anything, as you guys see, but products are obvious. So it's just a matter of time. So if you could be the one to do it, great. You could also compete on something that and do a better job at advertising or design. Like that's fine too. There's a lot of room. But as it grows, eventually it'll eventually become saturated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. Those are a bunch of points, like unique product, timing, how you go to market.
Yeah, and evolution. It's funny, having a few roles I've done, and I've worked in corporate space and run my own businesses, and I always think in some ways, change is inevitable, right? Like people are going to come after you, the world will change, the market will evolve, and if you're not willing to evolve and almost cannibalize your own revenue with the next evolution, then somebody else will probably do it for you.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah. So so what are you doing these days? Tell us a bit more about your current business.
Yeah, so just to put it all together, so when I started, when I was at Quantum in 2010 or 11, I noticed we were selling a lot of stuff via Amazon, as discussed, and we sent Amazon fulfillment, which is called FBA, fulfillment by Amazon. A lot of the products would have issues or discrepancies. So Amazon holds the inventory and they ship it, but there's issues on the way to Amazon and to the other fulfillment center, you name it. Now maybe it's only 1 or 2 or 3%, but in any business, or specifically in a lower margin business, of which I was, that's material dollars. So for example, if we were making 10% margins, uh, then if we can get back 1 to 2% in reimbursements, that's 15, 20% of our net income or EBITDA. And actually it was. So when I sold my business, almost 16 or 15% was reimbursements, which I'll explain. So what does that mean,
Mm.
reimbursements? That means that there's times that Amazon makes these different mistakes in numbers or calculations on all these different factors. And again, I built a software in 2011 to kind of do this for the company, kind of AI slash some human interaction to find these issues and file cases and get claims.
Mm.
Most sellers don't know that you could even tell Amazon that they made a mistake, but you can. It just has to be done in the proper way. And that was the early days. Someone actually ran with that idea as like a business, which is interesting, but it still wasn't doing it for me. And I went to several providers in the market because I really was keen on those dollars. And then eventually I wound up with the guys from Gatita, which is the company I'm with now, and I actually met him at this Prosper show, which is this online Amazon trade show that I actually also started. That was one of the other businesses that I did and sold.
Hmm.
And I gave them a shot. I was just kind of interested in their model, and it was very, very significant to our bottom line and how it worked. And I got a little more interested. So I basically became friends with the guys at the show I created. That's kind of the short story. And then I was, sending them a lot of business, and everyone was very happy. Whether they didn't use a provider, whether they used a different provider, with the experience, they're happy with the interface and all that. And like it was just a goodwill because the person would be happy that I introduced them, and they were happy that they had new clients. And I was trying to think maybe there's a place for me. I wasn't really interested in like commission sales at that point. So I was like, yeah, we'll figure it out. And then when the pandemic happened, or not, I mean, even after that, when I started realizing I was going to go away from the acquirer, I got into some deeper discussions. And I guess long story short, I actually invested in, I'm the CEO now of this company.
Yep.
So as discussed, we basically help sellers get back money from Amazon.
Yep.
Um, we have a software that finds the problems. We have a whole service team that actually files the cases or a solution. It's a software and a service, which is really the key. You can't just
Cool.
have the problems. You actually have to have the full service together. And that's what leads to a very high success rate and um, let's say, quality cases and information.
Yep.
And yeah, we're growing quite rapidly. I'm trying to help the growth here. It's a bit different business. It's more of like a software tech-enabled business than
Yep.
selling products, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm helping sellers. I'm using my experience as a seller, and I'm using my network of sellers and knowledge to really kind of, you know, take this to the next level. And so far, so good.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. And it's a big shift going from selling products to software and services and things like that, right?
It's a shift. I guess the commonality is that I'm helping people make more money and make smart decisions with their
Yeah.
inventory where I may not have, or that was something I was keen on before.
Yeah.
But at least I don't have
Yeah.
to deal, let's say, with the cash flow or the actual units. I could just help people kind of align there, which is really rewarding as well. It's not just, again, not money or fame, but it's really like really helping sellers in the
Yeah.
community. And we
Yep.
try to do that with our education and our tools.
Yeah, nice, nice. It's funny because as you say, this whole selling on Amazon thing is just it's evolved, and it certainly it sort of popped up on my radar probably about 3 years ago, 3 4 years ago, that I started hearing about this as well, and probably less advanced here in Australia than of course the US because Amazon took a little time to get here, but I almost feel like now it's almost like a cottage industry has popped up of people teaching other people how to have or start and build an Amazon business. So it's kind of that to me is the sign that it's evolved when people are creating these little mini businesses, right? I imagine people like that are probably keen to be affiliate partners or something of yours as well, right? I mean, hey, if you're going
Yeah,
to do this, do that.
yeah. I mean, yeah. So I know I don't want to focus on, let's say, the one business, but that Prosper show that I started, that was one of the first with a bunch of folks. That was one of the first trade shows like in the industry.
Yeah,
And before then, there was really nothing. But since then, and obviously this last show, it was thousands of people and hundreds of vendors. Obviously, the industry grew and the show grew. But to your point, there's so many sellers and there's people trying to make money off them. Some good, some not good. And yeah, there's courses and masterminds and weekend getaways, and a lot of it's good. A lot of it's not, and I don't like that. I don't like this get rich quick.
Yeah.
Hey, watch this YouTube video and you'll make a lot of money, or just do this at night and you'll make a lot of money. Because the reality is, if someone wants to hear that, it's very hard, as I mentioned, and grueling. And if it's not a passive income that doesn't exist, that term, and you need to be in the game. So if you could take these courses and be one of the few percentage people that actually do everything, then great. But don't think that's likely. Again, you just see the success. So not to
Yeah.
burst everyone's bubble, it's very hard. And it just gets harder. But yes, it's a tremendous opportunity. You could just reach the whole world on a platform of products that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And if you work hard, you'll be successful. But just be wary of some of these get rich quick courses that have crept in. To your point.
Yeah, really, really great advice. I think this idea of, we've all heard it, right? If it's too good to be true, it probably is. It's probably not real, and all this sort of stuff, all these analogies. It's ultimately business has its challenges, right? You got to be passionate. You got to have the drive and the willingness to push through the hard times because every business has them. So,
For sure.
Eytan, I've really enjoyed your time. I really appreciate you sharing your story with me. Are you happy for people to reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, of course.
Cool.
No worries.
We've got a few links for you, of course. Most people kind of are happy they're on LinkedIn, and I know you're on LinkedIn. We're connected.
Yeah.
Is that a good way for people to reach out?
Yeah, you could email me. It's my first name, Eytan, Eytan, at Getida, my company.com,
Cool.
getida.com, or you could do LinkedIn, or you could do Facebook, or you could whatever. I'm pretty
Awesome.
responsive. I like to help. I'm happy to help. I like to learn, and yeah, I appreciate you having me. It was fun.
Oh, an absolute pleasure. Well, look, we'll put all those links, including your email, into the show notes for those listening. And as we always say on the show, if you do reach out, maybe just let Eytan know that you heard him being interviewed on the podcast, so he at least has some context as to why you're reaching out. But Eytan, thank you again. I'm super grateful. It's been fun chatting to you, and really appreciate it.
Thank you.